Okay? Good. Why? Why are we giving the aid to Greece and Turkey? That helps with the context.
Well, they were giving aid because they wanted to help to prevent communism from spreading.
Good. Why do we want to stop communism from spreading? Go ahead.
Oh, because of the domino theory?
Yeah, the Cold War. Big picture, right? You guys don't need to get any more specific than that. I think you're overthinking it. We have this Cold War, this conflict of ideologies between capitalism and communism. We think if we let one country fall, the rest of them around them will fall. And we're trying to give aid to Greece and Turkey because they're fighting communism. What is this policy called? Go. No. Truman Doctrine. It's part of the bigger idea of containment, but aid to Greece and Turkey specifically. So if you say containment, great, that's fine. To be more specific and more accurate, it's part of the Truman Doctrine. Because it's Greece and Turkey. Those are the countries that are actively pushing against a potential communist overthrow. The Marshall Plan is applied to what kinds of countries? Give me some examples. Where's the Marshall Plan money going? What? England. Good. Where else? France.
Germany.
What part of Germany?
West.
There's 2 Germanys now. Yeah, good. West Germany. Good. And yes, to a smaller extent, Greece and Turkey. But the Marshall Plan isn't really controversial because it's just reinvesting in countries that need our help. The Truman Doctrine is a little more controversial because it's sending military supplies and support to countries that are fighting communism. Now, is this cartoon pro or anti-Truman Doctrine, Adrian?
I think it's blind. I mean, my bad. He's outside because he's walking over the log blind.
Yeah, he's first of all, he's walking on a log. That's dangerous. Second of all, he's doing so blindly. And third of all, if you just know anything about physics, which none of you do because I've seen your physics grades, this log is going to tip as soon as he gets to a certain point because it's not very well supported here. So yeah, this is this idea that now that we're trying to stop communism everywhere and anywhere and for any reason we can, is going to lead us toward just giving money away blindly everywhere that might need money. And if you guys remember from Thursday, there's that critique of containment by a journalist named Walter Lippmann that we read in class. And his critique was like, if we try to fight communism everywhere in the world, we're going to get ourselves into expensive conflicts over countries that don't really or shouldn't really matter. And we're going to neglect our actual allies because we're busy. Did I get his name right? Not countries that actually matter because we'll be worried about all these little countries like Greece and Turkey and Nicaragua and Guatemala that shouldn't matter so much to our foreign policy. Cool? Good job. Good job, good job. Announcements before we get going. Your next boot camp is scheduled for this Saturday. Come. Don't come. Come for an hour. Come for 4 hours. Come for 12 hours. I won't be here for 12 hours, but you're welcome to come for 12 hours. Just go hide in the corner when I leave so I don't feel bad about leaving you. But the AP test was 2 months from yesterday. Yesterday was your 2-month warning. Yesterday was the 11th of March. The way months work, 1 month from yesterday will be April 11th, and then will be May 11th, that'll be your testing. So you have basically 2 months minus 1 day. We are under 2 months to go, which is nuts. We had like 10 months to go, 9 months to go, 8 months to go. Oh my God, it's in 6 months. Yeah, oh my God, we're covering Jackson. Here we are. There's 2 months. So I'm urging you, it's why I emailed you guys this morning, like I need you to stay on your A game just until May 11th, and then I don't really care what you do. No, I mean I care what you do like as humans, just as APUSH students. May 11th. We're almost there. Period 8 requires you guys to do a lot of reading, but we're almost done with period 8. All right, we covered it very quickly because at this point in the school year, you should be able to learn things at a rapid rate, partially independently. If not, I haven't done my job. So stay with your nose in that textbook. All right, stay taking care of your notes in class. Stay literally after class if you have questions. Come on Thursday. Come on Saturday. All right, also in a week and a half, you guys have spring break. Now your spring break, for whatever reason, is super freaking long. All right, you guys are off for 12 days, which to me is the dumbest use of days off on God's green earth. You guys have next Thursday and Friday off for teacher planning day and teacher data day. Then you guys are off for a whole week for spring break, which is well deserved. You guys deserve it. Then you guys are off that Monday after spring break for Cesar Chavez Day. It's because you guys are off for, I know, because you're off for 12 days, I'm trying to get as demo period as possible before then. So we have a nice, clean, neat end. Clean up any loose ends over spring break that you need to. I'll do one lecture after spring break on Reagan, the end of the Cold War, and the war on drugs and these things. All of period 9 in a day, because it's just 5% of your test. And then we're done. So because your spring break is so long, I scheduled a boot camp during spring break on the Tuesday of spring break. Whatever date that would be, I'll tell you right now. So your next boot camp is Saturday, the 17th, St. Patty's Day, the holiday of my people. I will happily sacrifice 4 hours in the holiday of my people for you and your livelihood. The spring break boot camp will be the 27th, Tuesday, excuse me. Same time, 8 to 12-ish on a Tuesday, which is great because you guys are off for such a long time that it gives us a chance to bring you in on a Tuesday, check in, make sure we're doing okay, taking care of our business. And then you guys still have plenty of break to enjoy. And then we're basically almost at test day. It's nuts. I have like 3.5 weeks to review. And it'll go by like this. And then it's over. Then you take your test, and then you cry. Some of you, you're like, it's over, it's emotional. And then I cry, because I never get to teach you guys APUSH again, and then we all go home. And enjoy ourselves over weekend. Cool? Questions, comments, concerns? So moral of the story, now's not the time to stop caring. Right? You need to read. You need to read. You need to read. It's the single biggest indicator of college success. So I make you guys read so much. If you can read a textbook and understand it for your own, you're going to be successful in college. If you can't, you might still be successful in college, but it's a bigger uphill climb. All right? So let's get cracking today. I hate my announcements. I hate my boot camp announcement, my life announcement. All right. And then WASC people are wandering around. So they come in and bug you and ask you a question. Be nice. Look like you're working hard. You guys are always working hard in this class anyway, so I'm really not concerned at all. WASC isn't about putting on some special show. Unless you're Michael Bush, who looks like he showered and put on a real sweater today. What?
His hair is more
what?
wet.
His hair was like wet?
Yeah.
I'm sorry about that. It's weird. The fact that you noticed that is weird. This is what I wear, not this specific, this is what I wear every Monday, so I'm not dressed different, I'm teaching different, I just have shit to teach, so we're going to teach it. Cool? Alright, so today we're looking at Eisenhower and Kennedy. Way more time on Eisenhower than Kennedy, because Kennedy's only president for like 1,000 days and he dies. But Eisenhower's got a full 8 years. Economic prosperity. Let's break down our title first. Vargas, what does economic prosperity mean?
Increase in money.
Yeah, increase in money. Stability. Economically, we're doing well. Amidst, while there is both global and domestic upheaval. Georgie, what does global mean? The whole world. Take your head off. Good. Marley, what does domestic mean? What? Yeah, at home. So there's upheaval in the world. There's upheaval at home. What does upheaval mean, Josh? Conflict, chaos, problems. Yeah. So everything looks really nice. We're rich. The economy's doing well amidst some upheaval elsewhere in the world. Good. There's your two concepts. They are there. Your prompt is wrong. I didn't fix it on here, but it's the right one on your notes. Can you read the one off your notes for me, please? Rodas.
Evaluate the extent to which U.S. foreign policy during the early Cold War impacted the U.S. role in the world, American identity, and the U.S. economy from 1945 to 1960.
Cool. How much is the U.S. for our role, our foreign policy, what we're doing for communism, containment, Marshall Plan, Truman Doctrine, Eisenhower Doctrine, all this stuff? How much is that impacting our role in the world? A lot. Our identity, who we are? A lot. And our economy? A lot. So we're going to actually write that today and we'll be good to go. Outline is as for Truman's policies, what we're doing domestically under Truman, what we're doing other countries under Truman. Eisenhower, that's a review from last Thursday if you were around. Eisenhower, same thing. We'll look at the 1950s domestic prosperity again, even though I hit it on Wednesday. Again, and then we'll look at the other Americas. Underneath this prosperity, underneath this Cold War, there's a lot of poverty that's not really being looked at. We'll start looking at it a little bit. And then at the very end, the last couple of minutes of class, we'll hit Kennedy's Cold War, which is not very long because his presidency is not very long. But a lot of important stuff happens. But you guys read about that, so it shouldn't matter whether I get to it or not because you You guys read about that, all right? So Harry asked Truman, our friend, all right, what does the S stand for?
Nothing.
How can the S stand for nothing? Weird. Yes. His domestic policy, as you guys remember, is called the Fair Deal. The Fair Deal. He says in 1949 in his State of the Union address to Congress and the whole country, everybody, whoever you are, every individual, every part of our population, everybody has a right to expect from his government a fair deal. Fairness. That's all we should ask for from the government. Equality, fairness. Now take 20 seconds with the person next to you. What president does this most sound like in our past? 20 seconds, shout it out, go. Who does that most sound like? Not FDR. Why would it sound like FDR? Yeah. All right. Let's try this. Want this? Who does this most resemble from history? Not FDR, but I can see why you said that. What side of society wouldn't think FDR was being fair? What? Marginalized group, sure, but who else? Who else does FDR's policies really attack? Big business. Big business. So who, Terry? Theodore Roosevelt. All right, his square deal says, I'm not going to side with business or labor or whoever. I'm just going to do what's the right thing, what's fair. So yeah, FDR is not a bad guess whatsoever. But for big business, they would have said FDR was too liberal. So not fair to us. Yeah, so Truman saying, like, I don't care who you are, you should expect the government to be fair to you. As we know, under his presidency, we're going to talk about last week, the Taft-Hartley Act is passed, which reduces the power of labor unions, which I would argue is a negative for lower class society, but there are some significant progressive points on segregation. Executive orders 9980 and 9981 are both signed by Truman, which desegregates the federal government. That's a big deal. Now our State Department, our Treasury Department, all this, the White House is desegregated. And the military, 9981, is desegregated. People are integrated, black and white, into the same space, same jobs, same agencies, same this, same that, same units of the military. We have ended segregation in those two parts of our society. Big deal. Question for you, for bonus points. Who was the president that segregated the federal government? Who was the president that segregated the federal government, that separated black and white, and removed most black employees from the federal government, specifically the bureaucracy? Which president would have done that? Hector, take a shot at it. As you'll notice towards the end here, I'll sprinkle in as much little review questions as possible to bring these things back. Who do you think? It's okay. What do you think? Do you know any presidents?
Yeah.
Okay, good. Good. Adrian, who do you think? Rodas, who do you think? Who would be a president that would have segregated the federal government? Good.
Jackson.
There were still slaves
Yeah.
when Jackson was president. So yeah, there was segregation, and then there's segregation in the fact that there's forced slave labor. So there are no black people serving in the government when slavery is legal. That's all right. That's a good guess. I mean, at least you said a president's name. What do you think? Wow, first period, like 5 people had it right. I know, you guys are embarrassing right now. Go.
Is it Wilson?
It is Wilson. Why?
Because like I guess he was racist.
Well, yeah. Thank you. He was racist. He's the one who shows Birth of a Nation as the first movie in the White House. He's the one who removes that last little segment of progressive population that's put black people into the government. Yes, it is in fact Wilson. Well done. There you go. Good job. Proud of you. I came back to you after asking if you knew who the president are. So, yes, Truman desegregates the federal government. Big deal. And he desegregates the military, which has been segregated since always. Right? Black people have always, since the Civil War on, served in segregated units of just black soldiers. So now, going forward, the U.S. military will have units that are white and black together, which changes people's perspectives. You come back from fighting a war with somebody, it doesn't matter what color they are, like you shared that experience. On foreign policy, we went over this at great length on Thursday. His big policy is called containment. Everybody's policy is called containment. More specifically to him is the Marshall Plan and the Truman Doctrine. Marshall Plan to rebuild Western Europe in a capitalist model. And then Truman Doctrine to provide economic and military support for any nation threatened by communism, a more direct threat. Greece and Turkey being the main chief recipients of this. Under him, the National Security Act is passed in 1947, which creates three important things: the Department of Defense, the CIA, and the National Security Council, which oversees giving the president briefings on national security. And under him, the National Security Council puts out their 68th memo, so it's called National Security Council 68, which said we're going to need to spend more money on our defense, more money on our arms, have a big military, and be ready to ramp up the Cold War if needed. And this is going to begin what's called the military-industrial complex, of using our industrial power, even at times of peace, to keep spending and spending and spending, to always be ready. To spend as much money as possible in the military, so it doesn't matter, in a drop of a hat, you can do whatever you want. That's what then leads to things like NATO, the North Atlantic Treaty Organization. Then we should have friends, and all our friends should spend a lot of money on the military. Good. So just take 30. Do you think he's, and there's no wrong answer here, is he more successful on domestic policy or foreign policy? Write it down, and then we'll break down when we get done with that. 30 seconds, go. Harry Ashton. Vargas, domestic or foreign, and why?
Both terms, they're pretty good because they're just trying to protect themselves and they're trying to protect others as well.
There's no specifics there. We can get you any points in anything in life. Jesus, but you're right. Domestic or foreign, and why?
I think foreign.
Why?
I think he does a great job in providing more military support and aid to other countries.
Good. So there's a specific thing. Cool. Want this? Domestic or foreign, and why?
Foreign.
Foreign, why? I agree with you.
Provides like more aid towards other countries.
Yeah, there's more action for him on foreign policy. A lot of his domestic stuff is stopped by that conservative Congress we talked about last week. So yeah, nicely done. His only foreign policy failures are, of course, large, though. He loses China, so to speak, to the communists, and he does not end the Korean War. The Korean War is at a stalemate, is at a tie. It's just going on forever. Nobody's moving. It's like World War I of just trench warfare, but with nuclear bombs this time. So that's his foreign policy downfalls. However, the Marshall Plan is very successful. The Truman Doctrine works, keeping Greece and Turkey from falling. And we have all of this new stuff in place to fight the Cold War in a new way. Good. Now that gives us our next president, Dwight D. Eisenhower. Now we've had two back-to-back Democratic presidents, 17 terms of FDR, and then a term and a half of Truman. In 1952, the Republicans get back the White House, but it's a new modified Republican Party. The public is frustrated with the Korean War. Why isn't it over yet? Why haven't we bombed China? What the hell is going on? And the public is scared, as we talked about last week, with this new Red Scare. There's communists in the government, Terry. They're everywhere. They're in the State Departments. They're in the Defense Departments. I have in my hands No, I won't show you the evidence, but it's right here in my hand. Don't question me, I'm Senator McCarthy. And that leads to the public switching parties, being more pro-Republican in 1952, electing Dwight Eisenhower, who promised an antidote, medicine for the three problems he pointed out in society: the Korean War, communism, and corruption in the government. He's going to fix these things. It's helpful. He runs as vice president is Richard Milhouse Nixon, one of the ugliest men in American history. But Nixon is from California. He's a congressman who was famous for being tough on crime, tough on communism, and tough on corruption. So they're going to let this big war hero from World War II and this big anti-communist Nixon be a perfect party. Be good to go. So Nixon is the anti-communist, anti-corruption part, and Eisenhower promises to fix Korea. He says, elect me, I will go to Korea myself and end this war. And he does. It's quite impressive. After he's elected, Eisenhower does go to Korea. He tells the UN generals that their battle plan is terrible. He overturns them. And he tells China, either stop backing North Korea and agree to this peace, or I will drop a nuclear bomb on your head. China's like, is he serious? Because if he's serious, we should probably listen to him, because I don't really want a nuclear bomb dropped on our head at this time. And China agrees. They sign the armistice, or the peace agreement. Doesn't end the war, it just puts a pause of the war, a pause that is still ongoing in 2018. Dividing North and South Korea at that same parallel where they started. So, but at least now, we pull our troops out, we don't have to fight the war anymore. He does what he promises there. Now, on domestic policy, it's going to be called modern republicanism. Modern republicanism. Now, up in this time, in the 1920s, the 19-teens, what was the Republican Party all about? Who did they back? Who backed them? Who are these Republicans? Ramos.
Previous ones?
Yeah, the 1920s, the 1930s, the 19teens.
Big businesses and corporations.
Good. Big businesses and corporations. Are they pro high taxes or low taxes?
Low tax.
Low taxes. Big government spending and programs for the poor? No. Why not?
Because most of those big businesses and Republicans believed in like social Darwinism.
Here we go. Right? So the Republican Party up to this time, from the 1890s on, Gilded Age into the 20s, are pro-big business. It's already up here for you. Big business, laissez-faire, small government, tariffs, no government support for poor people, anti-immigration, anti-civil rights reform. Because all these things require big government agencies, and the Republicans, it's not that they're anti-black people, they're just anti the government paying to support people. Small government. Now Eisenhower, that's why I asked him this question, how does he evolve or change the Republican platform from the 1920s? He's going to be a more, his is called modern republicanism. In that, yeah, the government shouldn't spend a bunch of money to support people, but I don't want to cancel programs that already exist to support people. He doesn't want to pay a bunch of government money to support X, Y, and Z, but maybe he'll do it if he can tax people to pay for it. So it's not just the government paying it, it's society paying it. So he's not going to end New Deal programs. He just might not extend or add new welfare programs to support people. It's very important. And he also pointed out that he needs to be really hard on communism. He thinks that this affluence, this happiness in society is fully dependent on us being strong overseas. That if we have any fear or tension, that will ruin our economy at home, so we should be strong on communism. The way he puts it, it's a great way to understand it. I'm conservative when it comes to money. I don't want the government to spend a bunch of money. I don't want to spend a bunch of programs for this and that. But I'm liberal when it comes to human beings. So I'm fiscally or economically conservative, but socially, for people, liberal. And it's true. He's the president that then uses the army to force the integration of schools. We'll talk about that on Thursday. Right? He's the president that forces integration of other parts of society. So his role is he's good at keeping a balanced budget, not having too much government spending, but also using the government when needed to push human being liberalism. So much more progressive than the 20s Republicans would have been. In his 8 years as president, he does a decent amount domestically, but he's seen as a much more successful president for his foreign policy, which we'll get to in a second. He doesn't end New Deal programs like most Republicans would have wanted. He adds to Social Security. He adds to the minimum wage. He pushes for the Federal Housing Administration that FDR had started to push for more suburbanization. Under him, we create 3 new agencies, which is like anti-small government. The Department of Health, Department of Education, and the Department of Welfare, which are also very important. So it shows like all of these, though, are more about humans. Right? This is an example of him being socially liberal. People who need help, finding them a way to get the help they need with the government. Under him as well, the economy does a really good job of keeping its boom from maturing. There's a real lack of inflation. Middle class prosperity grows. There's more people joining the middle class. Economically speaking, America is doing really well under Eisenhower's presidency. Now, the best example of him being socially liberal but fiscally conservative is the Interstate Highway Act. Again, a piece of very unsexy legislation that matters a whole hell of a lot, though. It's passed in 1956, and it adds 41,000 miles of highway. It's a lot of highways to connect major U.S. cities with each other. These highways are important for 3 reasons. One, the first reason, which people don't understand at the time. People are all excited, oh, look at these highways. They're put in place to facilitate the national defense. We have all these missile systems and all these tanks and all of these this and all these that. Well, if they can't get from point A to point B, what good do they do us? So all these highways are put in place with a really high bridge for each of them for roads to go over, so all our big missile trucks and all this crazy Cold War technology can go around the country where it needs to go. So he recognizes during World War II, and then going into the Cold War going forward, that we need better infrastructure to move our military around. What previous action in U.S. history does this resemble? Take 20 seconds to talk about it. Recognizing the need to speed movement of troops and the things, what previous actions does that resemble? 20 seconds, go. Maybe. Under Lincoln in the Civil War? That's a good example. What's a more recent one, though? Lincoln and the Civil War Railroad, that's a good one. There's a better, more recent one, though. Maybe even better in the period 7 test. Who knows? Stop there. Josh, what you got?
I said that when FDR made, when he shifted the industry to a more...
Sure. But in terms of building infrastructure to facilitate the ease of defense. Ramos.
I was thinking about the Panama Canal.
That's what I'm thinking about too. Yeah, the Panama Canal. Building a canal because you realize we need to be able to move our Navy faster is the same thing but for more overland type of things. The Highway Act also facilitates more interstate trade, which connects our economy more than ever, and vacation travel. We have a new larger middle class that owns cars. This is where, for the first time in American history, we see road trips. Because now we have cars and roads. All right. The American families now are going on vacation more than before because they can, because there's such thing as vacation, because they don't have to go hike through the woods to get to the next city. And this is where the fiscal, financial, conservative piece comes in. The government does not pay for these highways, necessarily. The highways are paid for by the consumer, by gas taxes, tire taxes, and car taxes. So the people that are going to be using these highways are going to pay for the highways through the taxes on the things they'll use the highways on. Got to have gas, got to have tires, it's true. Got to have car. Smart. So the government's not paying for it necessarily. The people that will use it are paying for it through their taxes. So this doesn't extend government spending at all. You guys understand that? That's the conservative piece. It's not using government, it's using people spending. But it also helps people out, and it makes a big deal. Here's a map of all the highways added. As you can see, a lot of highways. Right, so now you can get, for example, from San Diego to Portland and Seattle. Anybody know what freeway this is?
5.
The 5. Yeah, the 5. The 101 is more on the coast. On the coast. Now you can get from Los Angeles to Tucson, where I went to college, all the way to Florida. You know the freeway? The 10. 10 East. Literally, you can get on the 10 East, which is right here in downtown, and you can not get up. I mean, you can get the freeway for gas and food and probably go to the bathroom. You can take the exact same road from Los Angeles to the East Coast in Jacksonville. But that means all of our missile systems that are being built in Los Angeles can then be shipped all the way to the East Coast if we need to, and vice versa. Good. So I talked about it Wednesday, but it's worth noting again, this post-war boom is legit. Financially speaking, this post-war boom is caused by a few things. The first is a desire for consumer goods, because we couldn't buy anything in the 30s and 40s because of the Great Depression and the New Deal. So now we're buying things like record players, new cars with automatic transitions, TVs, refrigerators, filtered cigarettes. Yay! If you're going to smoke and kill yourself, at least do it more slowly. Have a filter. So we're buying new consumer goods. The second is government spending. The government is spending a ton of money. Marshall Plan, Korean War, Truman Doctrine, space race, bomb race, atom race, this race. And the third is the baby boom. With more babies comes more suburbs. With more suburbs comes more construction. With more construction comes more roads, more schools, more hospitals, more jobs, more consumer goods, and so forth. The American economy has grown from the Depression to the richest country in the world in just one generation. Somebody that was raised in the Depression is now an adult in the richest country in the world. It's quite the juxtaposition, quite the black and white. One key, however, is a shift, however, in culture and society. From people doing their own thing, doing whatever they wanted to make themselves happy, dressing how they want, listening to whatever music they want, doing their own thing, to conformity. In the 1950s, not everybody, but society is telling you, listen to the same music, wear the same clothes, go to the same schools, work the same jobs, and then repeat. Drive the same cars, live in the same looking houses. And that's going to be one of the critiques of the 50s, is everybody's being told by society what should make them happy instead of asking themselves, what makes me happy? That's what TVs look like in the 50s. Look at them. They're nice. Look at these things. Huge flat screen. The best part is the TV that I grew up with in my house looked just like this. It's not because I'm that old. It's because the TV was that old. All right, my mom to this day still has a TV that has 6 channels, and it works like 2/3 of the time. All right, we weren't really a big TV family, and I'm not to this day. So yeah, they used the TV like that. Literally, it was already hand me down from like somebody else's second cousin or something. I don't know. I was so embarrassed, so terrible. And they like used it until it like literally blew up and like stopped working. I guess the 50s are dead, Mom. It's 2009. With shows like I Love Lucy, is a famous 1950s show that I talked to you last week about, shows like Father Knows Best that are really pushing conformity as well. The Milton Berle Show. And the key here is that TV has replaced radio and print. TV has replaced radio magazines as the primary pusher of American consumer culture. Advertising, ideas, conformity, gender roles are all being transmitted through TV instead of through the radio or print media as before. Now, as mentioned on Wednesday and Thursday of last week, this leads to a ton of suburbanization. Suburbanization. All right, we have blue-collar workers. Blue are what kind of workers, Scarlett?
Industrial.
Yeah, like industrial, hands-on laborers, and white-collar workers, which is what kind of workers, fella? Management. Right, so like rich middle class, lower middle class, still middle class, living in the same neighborhoods, pursuing the same American dream, watering their yards the same way, living in the same square houses that look the same as everybody else. Yeah, oh boy, real exciting. These suburbs are fully dependent on automobile culture, because you got to get from the suburb to work. They're dependent on shopping malls and grocery stores and this real sharing of culture that doesn't exist up to this point because America doesn't have a shared culture until the 1950s. We see families living more in nuclear families, not extended families. So these small houses have husband, wife, 2 kids. There you go. Whereas urban living was more extended family, tenement housing, 4 generations, all living together in the same 1 bedroom. Right? When I was your age. But while all of this happiness moves to the suburbs, this white flight, we call it, of anybody that's lower middle class to upper middle class to rich, is leaving the city to go to the suburbs. It leaves behind urban decay. Right? Why did the progressive era happen in the cities? Because middle-class people and lower-class people were in the exact same place. So middle-class people looked at it and said, oh my God, that's terrible, we should do something about it. But now that middle-class, what would have been a middle-class reformer generation, is not there to see it anymore. They're living in the suburbs, living the American dream. That's why the progressive era happens in Philadelphia and Chicago and New York City. Because these people are in the same place. With all this white flight to suburbs, our urban areas get forgotten. Because there's no financial investment, there's nobody there to expose the problems. Society can turn a blind eye and say, life's great. Whereas in the Gilded Age, they're in the same space. Our suburb growth also leads in the 50s, it's important that you know this, a huge amount of increased church membership. Why? Because everybody's in the same suburb looking around at the same neighbors and they're all in a pissing match. Oh my God, did you hear the Vargas family didn't go to church on Sunday? We all got out, we all got our same Cadillac, we all went to the same church, and the Vargas family wasn't there. Do you think he's a communist? He might be a communist. Either that or he just hates God. Either way, he's going to hell. So in the suburbs comes this like huge conformity competition. Like, oh my God, did you hear? Carla got a new television? Honey, we have to get a new television. The Ayala family is passing us by. So it's this huge conformity that comes from things like even just church membership and education. And now the suburbs become an increasingly white, conformist, religious, boring society. Public schools grow in great numbers in the suburbs as all these kids have this American dream. And in the 50s, for the first time, college education becomes the norm for middle-class families. Now it's not just the rich anymore, but now there is this growth of education. The GI Bill helps. Other financial investment helps for the government. More colleges helps. And now even middle-class families in these suburban areas are expected to go to college as well. But you're growing up in the same neighborhood, going to the same school, and then going to the same college, and then working the same job, and then it's a boring society. It's a boring society. I mean, it's nice. Now, one of the most important groups that begins criticizing this conformist, boring, mainstream, same society culture is called the Beat Movement. A good name to know there is Jack Kerouac and the Beats, or the Beatniks. And they're going to come as this new, it's a very important term for that period 8, counterculture. The mainstream culture of conformity, they're going to counter it, or be anti that. They're looking at a society that has same clothes, same clothes, same clothes, same clothes, same clothes, same clothes, same clothes. And this is boring as hell. How many of you guys have read the book The Outsiders? Yeah, right? Who would be considered the beats in that book? The greasers. Yeah, right? The socias, these rich, middle class, white people driving the nice cars, all wearing the same clothes. Their society. And these greasers are this anti, like, let's do our own thing, look into ourselves for happiness, make our own decisions. They'd be considered the beatniks. That book is set in the 50s. It's a fantastic example. Same as West Side Story. Same exact general idea. Of you have a mainstream culture and then a counter to it. And then somebody falls in love across gang lines and someone gets stabbed and it's all kinds of crazy. So yes. These beat movement people are more, as I call them, Michael Bushes of the world. They're inspired by the Zen Buddhist approach to the world of finding happiness through your inner self. Looking inside for satisfaction instead of outside for satisfaction. And this early questioning of society becomes the foundation for what becomes the real big counterculture that blows up in the 60s. Because when you tell all of society, here's your box, fit yourself into it, eventually society wants to break itself out of that box. Because that is lame and conformist, and people don't like to be told what to do, what to wear, and what to look like. So that's what ends up becoming our counterculture movement of the 1960s, which grows out of the beatniks of the 50s. So all of our hippies, all of our enjoyable drug use, all of this, the hippies you know of that just sit around and smoke weed all day, and as you picture hippies in your head, comes out of these people. The beats are very well represented in urban cities where there's more liberal ideas and less conformist authority, not in the suburbs or the urban areas. San Francisco is the best example. San Francisco, starting in the 50s, will be that birthplace of all of this stuff. Bless you. The Haight-Ashbury district in the 60s will be where you have all kinds of free love and sex and drugs and just rolling around with your shirts off doing your thing. It'll be where at Berkeley we have our first real aggressive free speech protests. San Francisco becomes that hotbed of this counterculture, which we can compare to a good synthesis opportunity to like Boston in the 1770s. Obviously different things they're pushing for, but just this hotbed local push for change from one place, San Francisco and the Bay Area in the 50s, 60s, and 70s. Cool. So this gives us what we got in the 50s after the war, our suburban growth, our politics, our still unequal opportunities, and our popular culture. I'm going to give you 2 minutes with your partner to identify what are some things in American society as a nice little checkpoint. What are some things in our society, whether they're up here or not, that demonstrate continuity, that are continuing things of the same nature, like, I don't know, unequal rights and the like. What are some things that demonstrate change in the 50s? Cool, 2 minutes, but I don't need you to write out, I need you to put a column together. All right, 2, 3 things for each. Tick, tick, go. What are some things that demonstrate continuity? What are some things that demonstrate change? Where do we see continuity? Where do we see change? What about politics? Cool. Rodas, what's a continuity in 50 society?
There's still segregation between minority groups and like lower class.
Yeah, segregation. Absolutely, both in terms of race and also class. Cool, agreed. What's another continuity, George? Fear of communism. Absolutely. It's a continuity from when? Because you're. What's a continuity from what other time, though? God damn it, George. Jesus. When else are we scared of communists? After World War I. Good job. Yes, in the 1920s. Good job, Georgie. Hector, another continuity in the 50s. What else is the continuity, though, in 1950s culture? Society, government, politics. economic growth? Yeah, because in the 30s we had such good economic growth. Like good old Great Depression wasn't that bad. Carlo, what's another continuity? You got nothing? T squared. Yeah. You can say continuity is post-war economic boom. After World War I, similar. I'll give you some changes in the 50s. Val, give me a change.
I have it down.
That's okay.
There's finally minorities that are getting into like, oh my god, never mind. There's finally a over demand rather than supply.
Oh, good. No more overproduction. More demand than supply. That's a change. Good. Go ahead.
Conformity for individuals.
Conformity over individualism was a huge change in the 50s. Absolutely. Suburbanization is a change. Government spending on infrastructure. Continuity or change? Did the government spend on infrastructure in the Panama Canal? Yes. The railroads in the 1850s and 60s? 70s, 80s? Yes. Yeah, continuity there as well. Good. Good. But there are some specific critics that I want you to note. The first two aren't as important for who they are as much as what they're criticizing. The last two are important for who they are and what they're criticizing and what they have to say. Walter White, who spells his last name really weird, he publishes in 1956 The Organization Man. And he's making fun of Americans for being totally okay going to work and doing the exact same job as all their peers. You're a manager at this company, and that company, this company, that company. You all wear the exact same thing. You go to work, you answer the phone, you manage some people, you go to lunch, you have 3 martinis, you come back to work, you go home. And you complain to your wife about how hard your job is. Do something different. There's a really good clip in that Century series that I've showed you a couple times about the 50s. And the guy says, like, yeah, corporate America was great. I could wear whatever shirt I wanted to the office as long as it was white. That's the joke. That everybody has to wear. It's this corporate uniform dress code for people have to wear. White shirt, black tie, black pants, come home, pick another white shirt. Whatever shirt you want, as long as it's white. So he's criticizing the conformity of corporate America. David Reisman, he publishes The Lonely Crowd, and he criticizes these people for being so outside-directed conformists. All you do is look to society for what you should do and wear and say and think. People should look inside. He's giving some credibility to these people that are seen as the outsiders in society, because at least they're looking inside for what they want to do. They're just criticizing the two important things of the 50s in conformity. But these two are more important names, and that they pop up all kinds of times over the next couple of years. The first is John Kenneth Galbraith, and he publishes The Affluent Society. This should sound familiar to you guys. The Affluent Society is saying, yes, our society is so affluent. What does affluent mean? Profitable. We're so rich. We're doing so well. But as we get so rich, we've worried more about making money for ourselves instead of worrying about the common good and worrying about underrepresented social groups. So yes, on the society, everybody has their money, they're rich, life is good, but what about what's happening elsewhere? What about looking out for the common good? This book plays a huge influence on JFK when he becomes president, and then later Lyndon Baines Johnson, who's vice president, becomes president when he needs a bullet in the back of the head. As he pushes for things like civil rights, voting rights, economic reform for poor people. Very important book. Take 20 seconds with your partner. What book does that sound like in American history? What book does that sound like and who wrote it in American history? It's a very good comparison. 20 seconds, go. Ms. Dominguez, what book does this remind us of? Progress and Poverty. Who wrote it? He's got 2 first names. We don't trust him. Henry George. Good job. Right? Who says, like, hey, in the Gilded Age, how come every time society gets richer, the poor get poorer and the gap between the two widens? How come every time there's more progress, more poverty comes with it? Absolutely. Good criticism. And the second is Michael Harrington, who writes The Other America, which points out, like, yes, similarly, despite all this happiness in the suburbs, life is good. In our cities and in our rural areas, people are struggling. Struggling. And you'll read a chunk of his right now. So you have Michael Harrington, Other America. I'm going to have you just go chunk by chunk. So the first 3 paragraphs are on the front page right here. And you have this question, what does he blame for the poverty in America? And what does he point out that's different about this era of poverty? What's different this time? Cool? Just those first 3 paragraphs on the first page. Don't turn your page over yet. I'll give you 3:20 to read it and answer the question. Go. Tyler? 3:20. Time's ticking. Left arm. Oh yeah. What?
Sorry, I'm having trouble with the connection. Please try again in a moment.
I'll take you anywhere. Big brother's watching. $17 seconds. What's to blame for this poverty? What's new about this era of poverty that wasn't there before? Cool. Terry, what does he point out here about poverty now in the 1950s that maybe is different from before?
Well, people are moving from urban areas.
Yes, and what effect does that have on urban poverty, sir? Good job.
It makes it seem like they're being isolated.
Yeah. Like he points out what about the middle class and poverty? Carla, we talked about it.
The suburban growth made the middle class no longer there to address the poverty in inner cities.
Yeah, like before suburbanization, like the middle class was there in the cities. They could see the poverty. They didn't like it, but it was there, staring them in the face. Now we can just turn our attention inward in the suburbs and look around and say, look at this. Society's great. Look at that. He's got a house, he's got a house, he's got a house, he's got a house. Even T squared's got a house, right? It's got a ramp and everything. Life is good. What? Nice. Yeah, we're the same. We all have the same house, with the same color, and the same car in the driveway. And we're all watching the same TV shows and the same clothes. But yes, we don't have to look at the poverty anymore, and therefore we can fool ourselves into thinking it doesn't exist. Good. Turn your page. I'm going to give you 5 for the rest of it. 5:30 the rest of it. What does he blame for the lack of attention of the poverty? We're kind of talking about that. And then I'll give you another chance for synthesis. What book, author, or perspective is this similar to in American history? And tell me how is it similar. Cool? So get it reading. Tell me who's to blame for it. The last paragraph is my absolute favorite because it sounds like 2018 society, 1918 society, 1818 society, 2028 society. 5 minutes, go. I'm just making a guess. It'll still be just like this. Time to take a read. What is he pointing out about society? Why are people not paying attention? And what is this similar to perspective? Why now? They weren't before. It's like the anti-progressive. About 30 or so seconds left. Carlos. All right, take 30, talk to your partner, please. What is different about this era of poverty? Why are people turning a blind eye? What does this mean for society? And good synthesis opportunity, what is this similar to in a previous era? Different author. 30 seconds, go.
That are benefiting them, to them, there's no need to fix the poor because
or the middle class and the servers causes the lack of support and the rest of the middle class believes everyone is experiencing.
What? Good. Lady Vargas, talk to us. What is his point about poverty in America? Where is he at?
Harrington really aims at the middle class. More the cause of all this poverty because he thinks it's social growth that causes all the poverty.
Okay. Does he blame the middle class for the poverty, or does he blame the middle class
For being blind.
for ignoring it? Good. Right? By being able to move to the suburbs, you can forget about it. You can come into the city and see a brand new skyscraper being put up and think, oh, look, the cities are also doing just fine. Not understanding the fact that you took away all those people's housing to live there. You can see all this progress and also ignore the fact that people have no housing, people have nowhere to live. The urban areas are struggling. Why do I love the last paragraph so much, Scarlett?
Can you come back to me?
Yeah, be happy to. Go.
He points out like how the people who once used to live in the cities are now becoming like social Darwinism type of believers because they blame the poor for living off.
Good reference.
For living off of the taxpayers and like basically saying that they just mooch off of whoever like does their work and that they try or they make no attempt to pull themselves and the rest of their like population out of poverty.
I love what he calls it, social blindness. That's what it is. Allow me to be Winchell for a minute, not teacher of facts, but the opinion giver. I think like this is the same perspective people accused poor people of doing in 1818, 1918, 1958, 1988, 2028, 2078. I'll be dead by then, thank the good Lord. The point being that yes, he says there are real reasons poverty exists. And yet, when we think to ourselves, the poor are that way because they're afraid of work. They all have big cars. If they were like me, or my father, or my grandfather, middle-class white dudes, they could pay their own way, but instead they're living off of the taxpayer. Good job. Becoming very social Darwinistic-esque, especially when you don't have to see them. When you don't have to see them, they're just a number, a figure, a character, a data point. When you have to see them, go back to the progressive era, it's like, oh, this is rough. I should do something to help them. But once they become just a number, that's all they are. Do something? Your hand was, no, you're just stretching? Cool. Cool, cool. The entire invisible land of the other America became a ghetto, a modern poor farm for the rejects of society and the rejects of the economy. Emily, what does this remind us of, historically speaking?
Oh, the book, How the Other Half Lives.
How the Other Half Lives. hey guys, while you're over here doing your thing, there's another half of society that is real poor. We should do something about it. Bonus points. Who wrote it? Jacob Rees. Jacob Rees. Yeah, good. It's okay. Gotta remember those authors. Here's an example of a family that would be referenced by Harrington's The Other America. This family is in Kentucky, in rural Kentucky. We have a grandmother who has 6 kids and 6 grandkids living in the same shanty house with newspaper ceilings. Maybe call it Hoover wallpaper. You waiting for that, weren't you? There's their toilet. Life is good. They don't have plumbing. They don't have electricity. They don't have any utilities. The nearest running water is over on a mountain trail 30 minutes away. And it shows us that, yeah, like as our suburban areas succeed and thrive, our rural farm area has been struggling since the 20s. Our urban area has been struggling since before then. So while everything looks good and happy on the surface, there is still a significant struggle. Cool. So that's the 50s for you. It's a nice picture, isn't it? In the 40s and 50s, as well as in 2018, what's the poorest part of America? Take a guess. Terry, what do you think? Poorest part of America? Not Kentucky, but close. Vargas, what do you think?
Not sure.
Excellent. That's why I asked you what you think.
So we're in the Midwest.
No. Adrian, what do you think?
South.
The South's always a good guess because it's the South. Rural West Virginia. It's the poorest in the 1950s, the poorest now of just rural, no options, nothing to live on. None. Right? At least in poor areas of Los Angeles, you still have access to schools, utilities, options, resources. Right? When you're in the middle of nowhere and poor, it's a little more of a struggle. All right, so that's domestic policy under Eisenhower. Let's go quickly into his foreign policy, which is called brinksmanship. Brinksmanship. So domestically, decent success, prosperity, life is good. Foreign policy-wise, also a success. His big goal, shockingly, is to contain communism, like everybody else in the Cold War. I started 2 charts over here for you guys. Period 8, domestic policies you should know. Period 8, foreign policies you should know. So last Thursday we hit containment, Marshall Plan, Truman Doctrine, NSC 68, NATO, Korean War. Today we'll hit brinksmanship. Domestically, we talk about Truman's Fair Deal, desegregation, suburbanization, affluence, the GI Bill, conformity. We talked about modern republicanism already. And then we'll take JFK's new frontier at the end. So these are just things, I'll keep this going all period. All period 8, to give a nice little tally of these you guys should know. So he wants to take a much stronger stand against communism with the idea of massive retaliation or mutually assured destruction. Let me show you a picture of what I mean. Here is my line. There's literally a line right here on the classroom floor. Right there. Here's my line. If I cross this line, we're all getting detention. Every single one of you. The next stupid comment I hear, or wrong answer I hear, I'm stepping over this line. Now who wants to comment? You got something to say? Josh? Yeah, I didn't think so. Why not? You don't want detention? You don't want to push me? Why don't you want to push me? But why? But if I was here, would you push me? Because you're scared of me. Would you push me if I was over here? Yeah, you would. Would you push me if I was over here? Yeah, you would. Why? Because it's further away. This is brinksmanship. Is Eisenhower's going to say, I am this close to nuclear war. You want to push? Go for it. See what happens next. And nobody wants to push because we don't want to end the world as we know it. So his policy is brinksmanship, meaning I'm going to bring the U.S. as close to the brink of nuclear war as possible. And then nobody will push. One way of thinking about it. To use nuclear weapons as the first, second, and third option, as opposed to like the last option, and use the CIA to ensure we're getting what we want behind closed doors. His thinking is this will actually reduce our defense spending. This will make us spend less on our military, because we spend all that money on bombs. We don't need that money for soldiers, a large army, guns, planes, tanks. We don't need any of that stuff. I just got my finger right here. And that's cheaper than a huge army. That's cheaper than a bunch of other resources. You want to push me? World's over. There we go. Ramos, why are you so excited about this, dude? I know. Who wants the world? He has World War II experience, as you guys should remember, from Asia and Europe. He's a very pragmatic, it's a good word, from pragmatism back in the Gilded Age, about using logic and common sense to solve your problems. He's a very logical, commonsensical man. He's a good politician, he's a good diplomat, he's a good negotiator, and he picks John Foster Dulles as his Secretary of State, who's also a hard-line anti-communist. Do not cross this line. So the U.S. kind of bucks up and puts their big boy pants on for Eisenhower's Cold War policy. His idea of massive retaliation, he wants more bang for his buck. He wants more resources and much money returned to the military. He thinks that nuclear weapons and being able to deliver them from far away are cheaper than using a huge army, conventional armed forces, and they're more suited for what's happening in the Cold War. That if we have submarines that can launch an atomic weapon from 10,000 miles away, who needs an army? If we can launch a freaking atomic weapon from space, who needs soldiers? All you need is a remote control and a satellite. His thinking is by having massive retaliation as the only option, it would make the use of nuclear weapons therefore unlikely. And in that sense, it's true, because nobody wants to push you when you're not close to the edge. However, there's no other option. If you're this close to the edge and you get pushed, what are your two options? Blow up the world, or what? What happens if you make me cross the line and I go back? How do I look? I look soft. Yeah, you look like a pushover. So there's no in between. Either you blow up the world or you look soft. It offers no intermediate action if diplomacy and negotiation fails. Massive retaliation would look like what we did to Japan. Civilian resources instead of just military. And Eisenhower, Ike, as he's known, relies heavily on that brinksmanship. He used the threat of nuclear war to get people to listen to what he had to say. So he does this a couple times. You should take note. The first is in China. In 1954, the Chinese are trying to expand some of their influence over islands that are near Taiwan. In this case, Eisenhower says to China, stop, or I will drop nuclear bombs on your head. And China's like, are these islands really worth it? You know, turns out we got plenty of space as is. We could leave. Those islands, we could take them or leave them. No big deal. And they back down. They back down. He threatens nuclear war if China doesn't stop. Eisenhower hopes this will divide a little bit China and the USSR. It does. China, they don't know if he's bluffing or not, and they don't want to risk it, so they back off. The Russians don't come to the Chinese defense in this one, because at this time the Chinese don't have nuclear weapons. China's like, oh, you're going to bomb us, and the Russians will bomb you, and the Russians are like, that's your problem, dog. We don't got you on this one. We're not using our atomic weapons because you want those islands in the Pacific Ocean. You're on your own. So that starts a divide that will later sever the two, China and Soviets. So in that case, Eisenhower's strategy works. The refusal of the USSR to come to China's aid does add a slight rift between the two sides by the end of the 50s that will blow up more so later. Similarly in Egypt, Egyptian President Nasser, he nationalizes or takes over for Egypt the Suez Canal. A canal that other countries, England, France, Germany, the US have used for generations. Egypt takes it over and says, this is my canal now. That pisses off England and France. They invade Egypt to get the canal back because of oil. The USSR is pissed. They're going to come to Egypt's defense because they don't like the fact that England and France have access to all the oil. But Eisenhower does not want the Soviets involved. So he says to the Soviets, hey, you want to get involved in Egypt? I will put a nuclear bomb on your head. And in this case, the Soviets have nuclear weapons. They can retaliate if they so choose. In this case, the USSR says, no, it's not worth it to end the world over this canal in Egypt. So England backs off, France backs off, the USSR backs off, and who's left in the Middle East? Us. A role that has both benefited and come to a great regret to the U.S. in the last 50 years. So they all leave, and the U.S. becomes the clear leader in the Middle East. Eisenhower says in the middle of the crisis, if those fellows start something, we may have to hit them back. And if necessary, we'll hit them with everything we have in the bucket. Which means we're going to end the world as we know it. The problem here, though, is we realize that the Middle East is very, very susceptible or prone to communism. They're poorer countries who lack natural resources other than oil. So they are like ripe for communism 101. We can't let that happen because then we'd have no oil. And God, we need our oil. America. The Suez Crisis and the Suez Canal reveals that the Middle East is very vulnerable to communism. Ike responds with his Eisenhower Doctrine, which is basically the same exact thing as the Truman Doctrine, and the same exact thing as the Roosevelt corollary to the Monroe Doctrine, and the same exact thing as the Monroe Doctrine itself, but now instead of for the Middle East, or for Western Europe, or for Greece, or for Turkey, Latin America, the Eisenhower Doctrine says we will use U.S. armed forces to protect the Middle East from communist aggression. So now the U.S. is getting itself involved in even more places. In 1957, Eisenhower backs this up by sending the U.S. military to Lebanon, of all countries. I guarantee you 0 people in this room could find Lebanon on a map. Accurate? But now the U.S. forces are in Lebanon, of all places, because we want to stop the fact that they're going to side with communism. We want to install a government that's loyal to us. An enemy of my enemy is my friend. Much like the Monroe Doctrine in Latin America, now the U.S. is emerging as a police power in a new part of the world. Eisenhower also uses the CIA, very shadily, to overthrow the Shah of Iran, even though he was popularly elected. Doesn't that sound like democracy? He was picked by the people, and we don't like him. Why don't we like him? Because he might be a communist. The CIA goes into Iran and they inspire a revolution to overthrow him. Who do we put in his place? A U.S.-friendly Shah, a ruling family in Iran that has now since oppressed the Iranian people for many, many, many years. But, damn it, he's not a communist. Likewise, in Guatemala, the CIA goes into Guatemala and inspires a revolution against their far-left regime. And in 1959, we try to do the same thing against Cuban dictator Fidel Castro, but fail. All right, 718 assassination attempts later, the guy was still alive. He just died recently, so you know. In this case, the thinking is the ends justifies the means. Having a non-communist government is worth it, even though a lot of people have to die and whatnot. But tell me, just real quick with your partner, 20 seconds, what are the pros of these kinds of policies and what's the cons? All right? What are the pros of these policies and what are the cons of these policies? 30 seconds, go. Try it out. What's the benefit? What's the downside? Cool. So let's break this down. Adrian, what's a pro? What's the benefit of these types of policies?
Stops the spread of communism.
There we go. That's the only pro, really. It stops the spread of communism. Scarlett, what's a con?
U.S. involvement in other countries with like assassinations in the CIA.
Yeah, that's a con. What else is a con, Rodas? Okay, may not work. Georgie, other con. Barajas, Khan.
We're going against our beliefs.
Yeah. What? I'm agreeing with you. You should go.
Like staying away from foreign conflicts or like.
That absolutely, it's a very anti-Washingtonian approach of staying out of foreign conflict. What else? What other belief is it going against, Carla? Democracy of people deciding for themselves. Yeah. And how are these countries going to feel about America? Resentment. All these countries are going to be like, we had somebody in a government that we picked, we were happy, we were successful. And you came in and overthrew them. And you put somebody in power that we don't like, that doesn't represent our people, but just because they're friendly to you? It causes a ton of anti-American hostilities, sentiments, beliefs, opinions, specifically in Latin America and the Middle East, later in Southeast Asia as well, that doesn't go away for a long, long, long time. Now, also under Eisenhower's watch, we lose the space race. Oh my God, the Russians are coming from space. They're going to invade us from the sky. It's going to be terrible. The space race reignites the Cold War in a much more aggressive manner when the Soviets launched the first Soviet satellite, leading to fears that the USSR is going to win the race to create intercontinental ballistic missiles. These missiles that you can just shoot from Russia and go all the way across the world and then just drop an atomic bomb on America. That's a big conflict with North Korea right now in 2018. We realize once they can put a satellite in space, they can spy on us from space. They can. We got a whole generation of Americans that grow up looking out at the sky in the middle of the night, back when you could still see the stars before we ruin the environment, and see the satellite. Blink, blink, blink. That's freaking. Soviets are looking at me in my backyard. It's like, damn shit. I'll fight you. The U.S., of course, responds by speeding up its plan to build these missiles, its plan to build submarines that can launch missiles, all kinds of crazy missiles and craziness. Shut up, darling. Nikita Khrushchev, the head of the Soviets, now that Stalin is gone. Once he has Sputnik, he gets real confident. Khrushchev says, "We will bury you. We will bury you, America. Your grandchildren will live under communism," which is not popular opinion in America. Go figure. So Sputnik leads to fears that America is losing out in the Cold War. We're losing out on our investment. We're losing our competitive edge. We're no longer America. We're losing our American work ethic. We've gotten too lazy and complacent. We're going to be all communists tomorrow. Oh my God. What does the government do, though? They respond by reinvesting in progress. The government creates NASA in response, which is still a thing today. If you ask Ovula, he's going to work for NASA one day. They create NASA in 1958 to launch this idea of getting the U.S. to the moon before the Soviets, which they accomplished. Unless you believe in conspiracy theories, in which case it never happened, bro. All right, cool. Put down the peace pipe. Come live in reality with the rest of us. And the NDEA is super important. Recognizing the fact that if we're going to have a new generation of people in charge of these things, they should be smart. The National Defense Education Act uses the Cold War as a means to better educate our students. Huh. So we can't have a bunch of idiots running around. We need to figure out how to get into space to promote math, science, and technology education in schools. Even better, AP testing and AP classes is a byproduct of this NDEA. So the only reason you guys are miserable and your hands are tired and you haven't had sleep in 8 months, except for you who sleep just fine with your homework not done, is because of the Cold War. The Cold War, we lost the space race. We reinvested in education. Because of the reinvestment in education, we have AP classes. Here you are. Thanks, Sputnik. Thanks, communism. I know. Cool. So I have a great cartoon that demonstrates this time period in American history. I'm going to give you 2 minutes and 30 seconds with your partner to break down what is the context, what is his point of view, what's happening, what is this cartoon trying to get across, 2:30. Chat it out. I don't want you quiet. Go. Go ahead.
So it shows how they're going at it, but like the more point at the end, the more we get into it.
Next topic. Minute 20. What's the context, the point of view? Notice what?
Eyebrows, whatever people want. They could have both been just eyebrows or basically to prevent people using each other.
They're going at the work, but I mean,
40 seconds. Point of view, context. All right. Well, what's the context? What's happening in the world that makes this make more sense? Please, Ross. Yeah.
The USSR and the United States are going against each other because of the Cold War. Or no, something. Hold on, I know it. Okay, so the USSR and the United States are like basically fighting each other, but like you can kind of see that they have the same type of weapons and they all look the exact same. So it's like they're fighting themselves really because they look the same.
I dig that. Not a bad point. They're fighting themselves. Terry, take a shot at it, buddy.
It's like they're fighting a very pointless war.
They're fighting a very pointless war. Why, Terry?
They have bombs. They made a bunch of bombs they can't use.
They made a bunch of bombs they can't use. Why not, Terry?
Because it says on the account to be used because enemy might retaliate or something like that. Just because like they think the enemy might not retaliate, so they won't use it.
What happens if one side uses one of those Z bombs? I don't know what that is. The other side will use it too. So what is the actual, like, 2 words for the context? Nuclear war or, yeah, that's the word. Mutually assured destruction. That when both sides have these kinds of weapons, nobody's going to use them. All right, this is brinksmanship. This is Eisenhower's thinking, is that to avoid nuclear war, have all the nuclear weapons possible. Now, I argue this cartoon isn't pro or anti either. It's just pointing out the ridiculousness that is this war. You have all these amazing weapons and nobody wants to use anything except a bow and arrow. At the fear of pissing off the other guy. Good, good. So Eisenhower leaves office after the election of JFK in 1960. And in his farewell address, and I love farewell addresses because they're a chance for presidents to be like, hey, I was president. Society, this is what I learned. All right, Washington makes his points. Avoid foreign alliances. Avoid political parties. Avoid sectionalism. America's like, screw you, you don't know anything. Eisenhower makes his farewell address, and he warns the society about this military-industrial complex. Very important. That if all we're doing as a society is investing our industry, our progress, our production into military stuff, we're letting the rest of society lag behind. And eventually that's going to be a problem. He's arguing that this massive military spending is dominating our economy. It's dominating foreign politics. It's all we're worried about is the military. Military, 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 military. And he's right. Every one of these dark states has a ton of companies that are only being fueled, Boeing, in California, for example. Being fueled by military contracts, military investment, building new stuff for the government, for the military. So he gives us this speech at the end of his presidency. I only give a short chunk for you. So tell me, in 3 short paragraphs, what is his point of view on the Cold War, on the military-industrial complex, and what consequences does he detail for America if we don't change the way we look at society? I'm going to give you 4 minutes and 30 seconds to read and answer those 2 questions. Go. Diana, where's she going? ¿Por qué?
He didn't say. He didn't tell me. He said
Make it quick. Go. All right, 45 seconds. What is his thought on this military-industrial complex? Environment. All right, take a quick 20. Talk to your partner, please. What is his philosophy on this new military-industrial marriage, this relationship between the two sides, and where does he think America's going if we continue this road? 20 seconds, go.
I just put that he addresses the point or issue of the military power instead of he just like helping instead of worrying about the military, you know, the military security. We should be more involved in like the income of the United States instead of the military. And if they continue that road,
all right. What does he have to say about this military-industrial marriage? Josh, give it to us.
I feel like I got this one wrong.
What happens if you get it wrong? You gonna fall through the door, the trap door to the wolves? You might. Let's see. That might motivate some more reading in this class. That's what we need in the class is more wolves. Go.
So, like I was saying, I feel like kind of saying that it's kind of imperative that we just keep like this advancement.
Okay. Where do you see that?
Well, I think like systems along the lines of that.
Because I mean, it's tough. I get it. All right. Ventura, take a shot at it. Kevin Ventura.
I think what he's trying to say is to like keep doing what you're doing, but also like have a steady like. Also be careful what might happen because eventually, with all this power, people might misplace it and like bad things can happen.
That's fair. That's fair. Rodas, build on that, please. What does he think about this continued investment in this military-industrial situation?
I kind of didn't understand it, but from I guess it says how society should continue having military, like the building of military soldiers and all that, so it can help the economy.
Okay, yeah, that's part of it. That it's really helpful for our economy. Ramos, take a shot because it's a tough one.
Eisenhower might say like it's good to be based on the military, but not to let it completely influence on economic and political statuses.
That our military and our industry and the marriage has completely influenced everything right now. All we're worried about is the military and the investment. The line that says it all to me is at the end. Only an alert and knowledgeable citizenry can compel the proper meshing of the huge industrial and military machinery defense with our peaceful methods and goals so that security and liberty may prosper together. What have we focused more on in the past 10 years, security or liberty? Yeah, and that's the worry is that like every time the government's getting bigger and the military's getting more aggressive and there's more, like we're sacrificing our own ability to live free. Now we're worried so much about the military spending that we're going to neglect everything else. And we're putting all of our science into atomic bombs. All of our infrastructure into highways for missiles to go back and forth. Our society will become a fully militarized, therefore totalitarian society, and then we're no longer America anymore. So let's take a look. Here's 2015, Obama's presidency. Here's the president's proposed budget. 55% of our budget to the military. 3% for science. 5% for Medicare and health benefits. 6% to education. And then we just had a president run for president on the and win on the platform that we needed to take better care of our military. Because 55% isn't enough. So let me ask, was Eisenhower right? Has it gotten better or worse? Yeah. Interesting. So he warned us, and like most farewell addresses, we're like, what do you know? You're just the president. So to Washington. So as we wind down the 1950s, Eisenhower is on the way out. Our good friend Kennedy is on the way in. But Americans are optimistic at the end of the 50s. We're hopeful. We're no longer scared we're going to drop into the depression with one bad day on the stock market. We're anxious about the Cold War, but we're not as severely anxious as we were earlier. We will be soon, don't worry. Cuban Missile Crisis and the Berlin Wall and Bay of Pigs and the Vietnam War will give us more anxiety soon. And our big concern going into the 60s, not shocking, are on American values, what we stand for as a society, and race relations. Race relations. So I'm going to give you a second to just jot this prompt down for me before I talk about the very beginning of Kennedy's presidency. Before Wednesday, we'll finish that. How much? How much did U.S. foreign policy, what we're doing in other countries, how much did that influence our role in the world, our American identity, what we stand for, who we are as a country, and our economy? All right? So take 230. This is a very quickly writable prompt because they're all kind of the same level. Go. Write it on your own. Good job. It's almost like you guys are getting better at writing these things the more you do them. It's crazy. Riding a bike. Right, Terry? You guys ride a lot of bikes? I bet you do. A four-wheel bike? The FDR machine? How do you go from the wheelchair to no question? Fast transition, man. You are habitually free physical specimen. I'm impressed. All right, let me take a couple of not volunteers because there's no such thing as volunteers. You're being volunteered by a man named Winchell. He's a good-looking man. Our role in the world. To what extent does our foreign policy change that? Please, Ramos. No, just tell me for just one. Jesus Christ, one chunk at a time. How much does our foreign policy change our role in the world?
To a large extent.
Large extent. Why? Give me an example.
Eisenhower's brinksmanship.
Good, there we go. Our hands are in more places in the world. Good. America's identity. Georgie, what do you think there? How much does it change what we stand for? I agree. Why? That's fair. Now it's the first time in American history like we're really caring about our military in peacetime. Yeah, right? That's a big change. We're now not caring about self-determination of countries, but we're now like using our CIA to overthrow countries' governments. Like, who is this America? And how about our economy, Adrian? To a large extent. Why? Military spending is fine. Yeah. So now, for the first time, our economy is being fueled by all this military spending. Absolutely. So it's almost like this is a nice, easy problem because it's great extent, great extent, great extent. So as long as you're talking about qualifiers, because, you're in good shape. Good. Good. So 1960 rolls around and we elect John F. Kennedy. And it's important because he's the first Catholic president. Remember Al Smith in the 1920s? He runs twice as that wet Democrat, that anti-prohibition, pro-alcohol Democrat, and he gets killed. Not actually killed. JFK gets actually killed. He gets killed in the election for being Catholic. So it's our first president who is a non-Protestant, non-traditional Christian, in the sense of the word, president. He runs against Richard Milhouse Nixon, and the only reason he wins, there's a lot of reasons. One of the main reasons he wins is that Richard Nixon is ugly as hell. True story. It's the first time we have a presidential debate, me versus him, on TV. Now everybody has a TV. They're watching the debate on TV. Kennedy looks handsome. He's a good-looking man. Ask Marilyn Monroe. He's a good-looking man. He's well-dressed. He's well put together. His hair looks good. He looks well-organized. Nixon is unattractive, to put it lightly. He's sweaty. He's disheveled. He's like got nervous tics. He's freaking out. People that listen to the debate on the radio think Nixon won. People that watch the debate on TV think Kennedy won. Appearance is everything. Kennedy wins the election by literally 120,000 votes. A fraction of the popular vote. He wins the electoral vote more comfortably, but this demonstrates this divide. You can look at this good-looking man. This guy looks just panicked. I can't remember where the camera is. He's all over the place. He's freaking out. It's the first nationalized TV debate, which really shows us, ending the 50s, how important TV is on our culture. Then for the first time, we have a presidential debate on TV. Kennedy be president for about 1,000 days. More important than Kennedy, it's an unpopular opinion because all Americans love Kennedy because he's handsome and he's not that good of a president. Way more important than Kennedy is his vice president. Lyndon Baines Johnson will have a huge impact in the 1960s that we'll dig into at great length on Thursday and Monday. Hey, keep it out there, huh, Bush? His domestic policy is much more liberal. Much more liberal than Eisenhower takes over for. A return to more FDR-era spending and support for people. But all these Dixiecrats, these Southern Democrats in Congress, and the Republicans in Congress are going to stop a bunch of his ideas. They're going to push back on all of his ideas for education and health care. He wants to do aid for public schools, extend Social Security, unemployment benefits for the people that have no jobs, and medical insurance for the elderly. Congress vetoes all of it. Nope, sorry. Not passing that, not passing that, not passing that. Congress does pass some support for the poor, in that we increase our minimum wage. It feels like for the last time. Not really. And we increase funds for public housing. So under Kennedy, the nice thing is once he dies, people feel bad, and they go back and do a bunch of this stuff in his legacy. So LBJ gets a bunch of this stuff done. Medicare, Medi-Cal, Voting Rights Act, Civil Rights Act, Great Society, War on Poverty. LBJ does all this stuff after Kennedy dies, and Congress gets him on board and agrees with him, because Congress is a little more democratic by then. And they feel bad that Kennedy died. Sometimes it's good to die, you know? The economy's booming by 1963 when Kennedy says goodbye. The economy's booming. Our industry is booming. Our government is still spending a bunch of money. There's a tax cut in 63. The economy's booming. Jobs are booming. Everything is great. And then Kennedy goes to Texas, which is always your first mistake. Don't go to Texas. If you do, you might die. Fact. His policy is called the New Frontier. That's his domestic policy, to bring America to a new frontier, a new exploration of space, education, progress, the next step of society. And one of his important legacies, he doesn't accomplish a whole lot domestically because he dies. One of his important legacies, though, is re-strengthening the presidency in a Jackson-esque twist, to put all the presidential decisions not through his agencies, through the Department of this and that, but through him and his staff and his people. Cool? I'll stop here. I'll pass out your third to last chapter ever, which is wild. You guys should really, 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 really enjoy this chapter because it hits a bunch of really cool stuff like the hippies and the Vietnam War and the Civil Rights Movement. But there's a lot of questions for it because it's really important as a chapter. you were here? Make sure I get 36 before you go. This isn't that thick. I can make it sound thicker.
I don't know.